Okay, so Georgia survived a close one to Kentucky. Officiating was at an all-time low. Oregon found an offense, and I will not be picking Florida State to win another game this season. We have all of that and more to talk about tonight. So this is already such a crazy season, and this past weekend was no exception. But if you're here and you want to hear about the games, and we're going to get right into it in just a second, starting with the games that I made predictions for in my last video. My predictions were much more accurate this week as I started to really figure out what each team is, the identity of each of these teams. Hopefully we continue to hit on our predictions. So let's start out with Thursday night's game, Arizona at Kansas State. As expected, Kansas State owned this game. It's what I predicted. Avery Johnson improved and was effective on the ground as usual, but this time he was also accurate through the air. No interceptions, which, that's definitely an improvement. Kansas State just played a very balanced game, succeeding at all three phases of the game. Like I mentioned last week, Arizona's pretty one note, and they rely way too heavily on that connection between Fifita and McMillan. And McMillan did have almost as many receiving yards as the entire Kansas State receiving corps, so he did have a big night, but that alone is not going to win them this game, and it definitely didn't. Like I said, just 2-1, no, not dynamic enough, and Kansas State was able to hold Arizona to only 7 points. So, yeah, you can't win a game usually with 7 points unless you're playing Iowa, and this year, still not. Kansas State outrushed Arizona 237-56. Arizona tripled the amount of penalties that Kansas State had. Arizona lost the turnover battle. They were worse on third and fourth down. Kansas State just was outright better than Arizona, and that was really not a surprise to me. Like I said in my prediction last week, I trust Kansas State's defense more. They have a history of being better, even if they hadn't showed it to this point, and they did show it here. I didn't expect them to perform as well as they did, but I did expect them to perform better than Arizona's defense, which is what happened. Luckily for Arizona, this game does not technically count as a conference game for some reason, even though they are in the same conference. Basically, this game was scheduled before conference realignment, so it's not considered a conference loss, even though it was a conference loss. Moving on now, I told y'all not to get tricked by this game. Alabama at Wisconsin. Alabama marched into Camp Randall just like I said and planted their flag. It's just in Alabama's DNA to do this. I've seen it happen way too many times at this point. I knew even without Nick Saban, they could do something like this still. Yes, Tyler Van Dyke did go down early in this game, but I really don't think this would have made a difference. Like I said last week, I actually feel like Tyler Van Dyke is actually is not good for Wisconsin as far as this matchup went. I don't think that he would have been able to just make the throws he needed to. He's got a little bit of a turnover problem, so they actually didn't have any interceptions in this game. So I don't think he would have done much. Obviously, with the score being as big as of a gap as it was, yeah, it wasn't going to look good regardless. Alabama was better on the ground and through the air in this game. They showed up looking much better on defense. The offensive line also looked improved. Like I said, we saw a whole different Alabama team setting up for a very interesting game against Georgia next week. So we'll definitely have to stay tuned for that one. Next, I have LSU at South Carolina. Not quite how I expected this game to go down, but I did get the outcome I expected. I did predict LSU to win. Before breaking this game down, though, this is where I have to really address the elephant in the room, which is officiating. There were several games this week that suffered from some of the worst officiating I've ever seen in college football. And I know that I've said that a few times, that there's been bad officiating throughout this season already, but this week was kind of insane. This is one that I feel like really cost South Carolina the game, and it was just really ridiculous. And I'm not the only one bringing this up either. Anywhere you look for a breakdown on this game, you'll hear the same thing. For the record, I wanted LSU to win. Both my prediction, I wanted it for my prediction to hit, and also just because I like LSU more than I like South Carolina. And, I have my biases, and this is one of them. And they were truly, even though I was rooting for LSU, they truly got lucky here because South Carolina got robbed of this game. It was like the refs didn't even really know the rules that they're supposed to be enforcing. In this game, I watched a pick six get called back because the quarterback got knocked to the ground on a legal block after an interception. For those of you who don't know, roughing the passer is not a penalty if the contact is made after the interception is thrown because the quarterback is no longer considered a quarterback at that time. I know that. Apparently the refs don't know that, or they just forgot. And veering a bit off track from this game, to talk more about the officiating throughout different games this week. There was a play in Indiana UCLA game where Indiana got called for roughing the passer when the quarterback hadn't even thrown the ball yet. It was some like Tom Brady level flag. Like it was crazy. He literally it was just a sack. It was a sack, and he got called for roughing the passer for some reason. It didn't really impact the outcome of the game because Indiana ended up running away with that game, so it wasn't close, but still, bad officiating is bad officiating regardless. And I'm going to even have to defend Florida here, which I hate doing that, but a Florida player got called for targeting even though his helmet hit the A&M player's butt. Didn't know that could be targeting, but I digress. What are we doing, guys? It just feels like there's no standardization in the way that we officiate games at this point. It's just so inconsistent and confusing that it makes a lot of these games feel really unfair and confusing. But anyways, rant over. Another reason South Carolina lost this game was because LaNorris Sellers went down. He got hurt and taken out of the game. If he stayed in, I think South Carolina probably wins this game despite the bad officiating. But it's next man up. South Carolina wasn't able to win the game at the end of the day. Injuries are a part of the game, unfortunately. All in all, I think South Carolina basically did everything they should have done to win this game. So a lot had to go right for LSU in this game to come out and get the win here because, I mean, South Carolina played the better game. South Carolina was up 17-0 at one point. That environment, I promise you, was on fire. They were able to run the ball very effectively, putting up 243 yards on the ground. LaNorris Sellers and Rocket Sanders just went off. LSU's offensive line, who was supposed to be the strength of the team, got pretty well handled in this game by South Carolina, and their rushing game was not nearly as good as they expected it to be in this game. At the end of the day, though, they didn't win. LSU did. And oddly enough, even in a win, I found that there was a lot more to be concerned about with LSU's team as far as, tackling, ability to stop the run, ability to, actually run as well. And a lot of other things. But what I did see that I liked about LSU was their composure and their resolve in this game. Even after they went down 17-0 in a crazy environment, they found a way to claw their way back into this game and win it. LSU had more first downs. They had more time of possession, significantly more passing yards. They won the turnover battle. And while penalties are a bit of a sore spot here because of what I said about the officiating earlier, LSU won in that department as well. I think LSU has a pretty high ceiling if they can clean up their act, and winning this game was really big for them. As for South Carolina, though, they look much better than I expected them to be. And even with a loss here, I can almost guarantee that they're going to be in my top 25 this week above LSU because I do think that what I saw from South Carolina was that they were better than LSU despite losing the game. Next, I have Boston College at Missouri. It's another game that went pretty well how I expected it to go. Missouri was able to take down Boston College, but not quite as decisively as I thought it would be. Like I said, that Florida State win looks less and less impressive the more I watch Florida State play. Boston College actually did do better in this game than I expected. Even after throwing 2 interceptions, they held this game within a touchdown. Like I said in my prediction for this game, Missouri's defense looked really solid. As I expected them to be, holding Boston College to 49 rushing yards. And that included holding Castellanos to 16 yards on the ground. But what Castellanos was not able to do on the ground, he made up for with his arm. He did throw 2 interceptions, but he also threw for 249 yards and 3 touchdowns. He made some really impressive throws in this game, despite Missouri's defense working Boston College's offensive line and consistently causing pressure. If there is a weakness for Missouri's defense, it's probably the secondary. There were some throws to be had there But Missouri could throw the ball themselves as well offensively. Brady Cook threw for 264 yards, and you better believe Luther Burden was a part of that. He's just an absolute monster. Maybe one of the best, if not the best receiver in the country in college football this year. Missouri also ran the ball very effectively, 176 yards there. Statistically, the game doesn't look as close as the score suggests. That's partially because Boston College was able to force Missouri into several field goals in the red zone, but also, despite it being a 6-point game, I felt like Missouri really controlled this game once they got the rhythm going. Also, random note, at some point in this game, there was a 2nd and 59, which is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. So I just wanted to talk about that for a second because I just thought that was crazy. Next game I have is Tulane at Oklahoma. And this is the first game on this list that I've whiffed on. I think that my expectations for Tulane were a bit too high after seeing them play like they did against Kansas State. And you really got to feel bad for this team because they were close again to winning here, close to another upset. They smelled blood but just couldn't get it. Another one-possession game late in the fourth, but it got away from them. And their quarterback, Mensah, did not play nearly as well as he did against Kansas State. I'm sure a big part of that was the environment. Playing at home as a true freshman and playing on the road against a major program are two very different things. He was below 50% accuracy. He threw a pick, but he still did make some really solid throws, and there was a lot of pressure, so he had to make some throws that maybe were not quite ideal. And I think he's really going to develop into a great quarterback for them going forwards. But Oklahoma just really outplayed Tulane in every area of this game, especially in the first half. Genuinely, I was surprised with Oklahoma's offense. Offensive line is still a problem for them. They gave up 3 sacks, but Jackson Arnold was unstoppable on the ground, and Deion Burks will be a problem as well. This week they play Tennessee, so they better hope they're ready for the Vols to come into town because I'm still not sold on Oklahoma yet, and Tennessee looks like they are lights out. As for Tulane, they are really close to matching up with some of the big dogs in this sport. They're just a couple of steps away. Next, I have Notre Dame at Purdue, and not much to say here. Notre Dame obliterated Purdue just like I said they would. Last week, I posed the question as to whether Notre Dame was going to let last week's loss against NIU tear them down or fire them up, and I think that the score here pretty much answers that question. Last week, I said that Purdue should be a defense that Notre Dame can get right against, and I was correct. They definitely were able to have a great offensive showing against Purdue's defense. I also said that Notre Dame's defense would be able to keep Purdue from scoring very much. They did that as well. Purdue only scored 7 points. I also said that Purdue's quarterback had ball security problems and will make bad decisions with the ball. He threw 2 interceptions, so that also hit. We got the version of Notre Dame I expected to see. And my preseason placement of Purdue near the bottom of the Big Ten also seems to be about right. I'm not going to really go into depth breaking down this game because there really isn't a point. Notre Dame dominated this game in the end. Or if they could have come into last game like they did with this game, they may still be talked about as a championship contender. I think they fumbled their chances for that already. 12-team playoff though, so we're gonna have to wait and see. But not being in a conference could really hurt them here. But this was still a pretty big win for them. And Georgia at Kentucky is my next game, and well, my prediction for Georgia to win was right, but the win was far from pretty and definitely not what I had laid out in my prediction. Although I really should have seen this coming. Georgia has pretty consistently struggled in their road openers, in their early road games in general, which does kind of scare the heck out of me for their next week game against Alabama. But at the end of the day, they found a way to win this game. Did that win come from a bad coaching decision to punt the ball on 4th down for Kentucky when down by 1 point, close to field goal range near the end of the fourth quarter? Maybe, but a win is a win, and Kentucky got blown out by South Carolina last week and then almost took down Georgia this week. The SEC is just full of surprises. Kentucky really owned the stat sheet, to be honest with you. They almost doubled Georgia's first downs. They had more total yards, 11 more minutes in time of possession, almost a fourth of the amount of penalty yards that Georgia had, better third down efficiency. Just everywhere you look on the stat sheet, Kentucky should have won the game. Last week, Kentucky had 6 completions total. This week, they had 14, and Vandergriff was able to use his legs effectively as well. To be honest, though, it wasn't Kentucky's offense that surprised me. They only scored 12 points, so Georgia's defense was really able to shut them down for the most part. They were banged up in this game as well, so the fact that they were able to hold Kentucky to that 12 points, no complaints here. But the Georgia offense is what really surprised me and concerned me. They just couldn't get anything going. Etienne looked just okay on the ground. Carson Beck didn't look all that great. And the receiving core underperformed as well. I'm not going to let this result trick me, though, and you shouldn't either, because Georgia has had similar struggles in the past in their first road game of the season for several years. Two of those years they won national championships. One of those years they made it to the SEC championship and barely missed the playoffs after a heartbreaking loss there. My point is, like with Alabama, don't let one weird result make you think Georgia isn't the team that we thought that they were. If you think that they're going to go into Tuscaloosa and just lay down and die, you have another thing coming, because it's going to be a good game. And a game like this can be just what Georgia needs to go out and meet their potential. I hope that is the case here, and I really feel like it is. As for Kentucky, they played a much better game than they did last week, so props to them for continuing to fight. We'll see if Georgia is the real deal very soon when they play Alabama, and that offense is really going to need to figure something out, because that's going to be a tough game. Next, I have Memphis at Florida State, and I'm done picking Florida State to win games. I almost changed my pick right before the game started, but I knew if I changed my pick and my original prediction hit, I would be even more upset, but now I'm really wishing I would have. This game is pretty simple to break down, and I said it in the past few games. DJ Uiagalelei is not the guy. I don't think he's a leader. I don't think he's a good quarterback, and I definitely don't think he gives Florida State the best chance to win. I think the receivers continue to be allergic to catching the ball. I think the offensive line cannot block to save their lives. The running backs can't get anything going. Sure, the defense did its part this week, but like I said before, Florida State is not a team. There's just no excuse for them losing to a G5 school like this. Sure, Memphis is a really good G5 school. They may have well punched their ticket to the playoffs with this game. We'll see, but there's some other teams competing for it as well that I'll talk about. But come on, that was just an embarrassing performance. Memphis had the better quarterback. They had the better team. That's pretty much it. Memphis ran the ball better, passed the ball better, secured the ball better, sustained drives better, and so on and so on. I don't know if I will continue to even make predictions for Florida State in my videos, because it's just going to be the same things that I say every time, because it's the same problem every time. But congrats to Memphis, though. I still don't know how good they are, really, because Florida State is so comically bad. And they're probably worse than some of the teams they're going to play in their own conference, in Memphis' own conference. So even for a team like Memphis, I don't know if Florida State can be really called a quality win. At this point, we'll have to wait and see. Next, I have Texas A&M at Florida. And Florida State's not the only team that is embarrassing the state of Florida. Florida is just an absolute dumpster fire, but I saw this one coming from a mile away. The defense could not stop the run to save their life. A&M was able to rush for over 300 yards. Florida's quarterbacks threw 3 combined picks. In all fairness, one of the balls was tipped in the air, so 2 interceptions that were really miscued by the quarterbacks. Florida went 2 of 9 on third downs. Florida had no ground game to speak of, only 52 yards on the ground. And Montrell Johnson, Florida's leading rusher from last year, had negative 7 yards through 7 carries. Just ridiculous. And Texas A&M also had way more penalties, almost twice as many. So you can't really blame it on the penalties. Napier played both quarterbacks in this game, and I think it's pretty clear that Mertz is the better option for now. Lagway really struggled in this game, and I could totally understand if Florida were to decide to roll with Lagway anyways. If they're just ready to accept that this season is not going to go the way that they want them to go, or they want it to go, and just put Lagway in games so he can get experience and build up his make him prepared for next year. In fact, I think that's exactly what Mike Norvell should do at Florida State. But unlike Norvell, Napier needs to win now to keep his job. He can't just set up for next year because he doesn't even know if he's going to be there next year. It may already be too late, to be honest, for Florida or for Napier. But if Florida can win some games in the near future, he may be able to give himself a little bit longer a leash, but I doubt it still. As for Texas A&M, though, this looked like a different team than what we saw in week 1. I don't know if it's just because they were playing against Florida, but I saw a lot to like about this team that I had hoped I would see in week one. Marcel Reed started in this game at quarterback, and I think it's in their best interest to make sure that he continues to start for them. He looked miles better than Connor Wigman did. He is dangerous with his legs. I watched him break a Florida defender's ankles in this game. He ran it and passed it very effectively. And may I remind you, this game was played in bad weather, so that was even more impressive. Le'Veon Moss was just able to go off on the ground. Like I said in my prediction, this A&M defense would make it really hard on Florida, and they did. 2 sacks, 3 interceptions, and like I mentioned earlier, less than 50 yards allowed rushing. Crazy. I told you I saw a lot of things that I liked about A&M in week one, and those things were definitely on full display here. And I may have seen a few more things that I liked here against Florida. And don't let the score fool you. Texas A&M dominated this game. It was never close, there was never a time where this game was in doubt. And the last of the games that I made predictions for last week is Oregon at Oregon State. And, well, you guys have done it. You let Oregon figure itself out on offense. Both teams in Idaho had a chance to take them down when they were wobbly, but they seem to have rounded into the offense I expected them to be when I ranked them number 2 in my preseason Big Ten rankings. Sure, they were playing Oregon State, but still a very impressive win, especially when they struggled so much against Idaho and Boise State. Dylan Gabriel went 20 for 24, and he had 64 yards on the ground. The running backs were able to get things going, picking up a combined 240 yards. The ball was spread to a variety of receivers, able to rack up over 300 yards in the air. The O-line didn't let up any sacks. The defense played very well too, but that hasn't really been an issue with Oregon anyways up to this point, so not super surprising. Basically, Oregon dominated this game. First time we've seen them control a game this season, and I will likely stop picking against them now that they seem to be rounding into form. So yeah, those are the games I made predictions for and broke down in my last video, but I also made some predictions on the social media accounts, so make sure you're following me there as well to get more predictions. Same handle, A_Rock321 on Twitter and X, or Twitter and Threads, or X and Threads, whichever one you want to go with. So here's some of the games that I broke down on my social media. Maryland at Virginia. I predicted Maryland would beat Virginia. I was correct. It was a pretty easy pick for me. I expected Maryland to be one of the better teams in the Big Ten this year. And while they may not be that, they still have plenty of talent on that team that I think makes them better than a team I expected to be the worst in the ACC in my preseason. So, yeah, not a super hard thing to pick. Pretty confident win for the Terps. I also picked Washington State to beat Washington. I was right on that pick as well. I went against the grain picking State to win the Apple Cup, and obviously, like I said, they did. I saw Washington State beat Texas Tech handedly, and I really hadn't seen any reason to believe that Washington was anything special in their first 2 games. Washington lost a lot after last year's national championship in both the coaching staff and also the players, so I expected they would take a pretty big dip in quality. This game really could have gone either way, though. It was back and forth. Very close game. Will Rogers actually played a really solid game. And on paper, Washington actually did play the better game, but penalties were a killer. 135 yards in penalties versus Washington State's 45. And West Virginia at Pitt was the one game keeping my social media predictions from being perfect. This game lived up to its name, though. It was definitely a backyard brawl. Honestly, one of the most entertaining games to watch this weekend. West Virginia was up by 10 points with less than 4 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, but Pitt came back to win this game. It was a good old-fashioned rivalry with a little bit of everything. We got one-handed catches. We got fake punts for first downs. We got blocked punts for a touchdown. Hail Mary into double coverage for a touchdown despite defensive pass interference. Just a crazy game overall. West Virginia, I thought, had the better team, but turnovers ended up killing them. I think Pitt may be a little bit better than I expected as well going into this season, so we'll have to check in and see how they continue to do throughout the rest of the season. And then I also predicted Colorado at Colorado State. I had a feeling this game wouldn't provide the same level of energy that it did last year. I'm not very high on Colorado, but I do think that they have a good enough team to beat a G5 school on the level of Colorado State. I was a bit concerned about Colorado after seeing Shedeur Sanders trash talk his entire team really last week in the post-game press conference, especially since this rivalry is a pretty hate-filled one. So if the mental was not really there for Colorado's players, it could really bite them in the butt. But Colorado was able to get the job done here, and they really didn't leave any doubt. I think Colorado is a bit better than they were last year, even if just slightly. Shedeur only got sacked one time this week as opposed to 6 times last week, so that's a huge reason for their success. Not much else to say about this game. Colorado handled its business. And the last game I put on the socials was UCF at TCU, and this game was incredible as well. UCF might have known I was going to pick them to win because they managed to come back from a 21-point deficit in the second half to win this game. Another incredibly fun game to watch. I told y'all in the preseason not to sleep on UCF this year. They can make some noise in the Big 12. I told y'all they would have an incredible ground game, and they definitely did in this game. RJ Harvey was not even human the way he was playing in this game. Also, KJ Jefferson is working out quite nicely for the Knights. He's every bit as advertised and is definitely an excellent dual threat quarterback for them. Kobe Hudson has proven to be the standout receiver here at UCF as well. His team is pretty dangerous overall. TCU also has some dudes, though. They look much better than they did last year. 402 passing yards, and the ball really got spread around to multiple receivers. Besh went crazy in this game for the Horned Frogs, but man, those 2 touchdown catches by Savion Williams made this game. Those were unreal catches. Basically, the Big 12 is still just so much fun to watch, and this was definitely not an exception to that. Now for just some upsets that happened this week. UNLV took down Kansas. Now they've beaten 2 power conference opponents. Granted, those may not be the best power conference opponents, but still they look very likely to be a solid candidate for that G5 auto bid spot. But they do have a pretty difficult schedule ahead, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Kansas really outplayed UNLV, but interceptions played a really big role in this one. Daniels threw 2, and both were very costly. Toledo was just embarrassed. They just embarrassed Mississippi State 41-17. Mississippi State, an SEC school, lost 41-17 to Toledo. This is not Vanderbilt. This is Mississippi State. I'm not even going to break this one down, really. But really, no SEC team should be getting body bagged by a MAC school. Not even Vandy, who I'm going to get to in a second. Again, though, Toledo could be another G5 school to watch out for. Speaking of Vanderbilt, they lost to Georgia State. I know Vanderbilt has a history of dropping games to non-power conference opponents, but they went and beat Virginia Tech in week 1. Then they shut out Alcorn State in week 2. I really started to believe that Vanderbilt may be somewhat decent this year, but nope, they're back to being Vandy. And those are all the major upsets. Some teams this week won, but they did not look very good doing that. Duke was one of those teams almost losing to UConn. They were actually down in the fourth quarter, but pulled it out in the end to win 26-21. Utah was in a one-possession game with Utah State in the fourth quarter. Didn't have Cam Rising, but still not the best look. Utah ended up winning 38-21. Arkansas was actually down 17-3 to UAB. In the first half and only had a 3-point lead in the fourth quarter, but ended up winning it by 10. That score was 37-27. North Carolina State had to come back after halftime to beat Louisiana Tech 30-20. And Arizona State survived Texas State, winning the game by a field goal in the fourth quarter. Texas State really played better, but turned the ball over 3 times, which cost them the game. And for my surprise teams, I have 2 of them. First being Indiana. Not much of a surprise for me because I told y'all they would have a much better team than people expected them to. And that was my preseason rankings. If you go back and watch that, they beat UCLA 42-13 this past weekend, making them 3-0 now. So definitely something to keep an eye on. And for my second surprise team, I have South Alabama. They played a no-name team, but they won it 87-10. I just don't think I've ever seen a real-life game reach 87 points. So I had to throw that in here to talk about. I know that I think Portland State won 91-0 last year against the team, but just a crazy number for college football. So I had to put that in this little video. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will have my my predictions for this upcoming week in a few days. So keep an eye out for that. And again, keep an eye on the socials. Please like, comment, subscribe. I hope you all have a great rest of your day or night whenever you're watching this. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys. Peace.